A recent Paul Tan article says that car prices could go up by 10 to 30% next year due to a not so new regulation by the government. So this one is a bit complicated, but to keep things simple, currently when a car leaves a factory, right, there is this thing called the open market value. And so far, only manufacturing related items are factored in that open market value. And the government's tax, so-called the excise duties, are based on this final value. Yeah, but from 2026 onward, the cost will include things like marketing expenses, administrative costs, profit, etc., etc. Basically, a lot of unrelated stuff is being thrown into the final cost of the car. So at the end of the day, naturally with a longer list of items, it will attract higher taxes, even though the tax rate remains the same. Right? And just imagine paying 6,000 ringgit more for your Perodua Myvi, 30,000 ringgit more for your Honda Civic, 15 to 20,000 ringgit more for your Toyota Vios, just because, well, if I put to a different example, just because you saw a McDonald's ad online, you have to pay 10 to 30% more for McDonald's. It's a bit absurd. And Paul Tan, he recently replied to one of my posts saying that the salary of the tea lady washing the mugs in the pantry, that one is also included in the cost of the car from 2026 onwards. And bear in mind, the revision will impact only locally assembled CKD cars. So if the prices of these cars go up by as much as 30%, then car makers, they'll be disincentivized to continue manufacturing, right? They will just bring in imported CBU cars because that's the cheaper alternative. And over the long run, it will be detrimental to the automotive industry as well as our country because production and job opportunities decline. So what actions are being taken to stop this right now? Unfortunately, we have the Malaysian Automotive Association president. He said that he is currently, quote unquote, engaging with the government, hopefully get some kind of understanding in order to find an alternative way to overcome this, because this regulation is actually not new. Yeah, it has been delayed twice since 2019, and 2024, the Ministry of Finance said that there will be no further extensions. So if we do see this price increase in 2026, yeah, that will definitely hurt our wallets a lot and will spell doom perhaps to the automotive industry over the long run as well. So let me move on over to the important things which is how can we come back to the consumer? How do I know if I can afford a particular car? Well, generally there are two guidelines. Okay, the first guideline is you buy a car that's close or equal to your annual salary. Very simple, super straightforward. Next one is you use the 27-20 rule. Yeah, this one takes into account the cost of the loan as well as other details. So first guideline, very straightforward. The final cost of the car, including insurance, right? You divide it by 12. That is the salary that you need in order to comfortably afford said car. So if your salary is 5,000 ringgit, you can afford Myvi, Persona, Alza, right? If your salary is say 20,000 ringgit, you can comfortably afford a BMW X1, A-Class, or even a Volkswagen Golf GTI. So this rule is pretty simple, but it doesn't take into account the cost of the loan as well as your down payment, right? Which is why you can also refer to the 27-20 rule. Yeah, you allocate 20% for your down payment, basically like ticking boxes. You tick box number 1. Then next, you choose a 7-year loan tenor because you don't want to pay too much interest, right? Then you tick box number 2. And finally, you see if your monthly installments add up to be less than 20% of your income. That is the final and perhaps most important box. And once you're able to tick all these 3 boxes, right, you know you can comfortably afford the car. So obviously, these two rules are more of like guidelines. At the end of the day, you can always adjust the percentages to fit your own budget. But more importantly, if you are not one of those people who likes to follow budgeting rules, right, it's much more important to ensure that you have a positive balance every month. And there are 2 ways to do this. Number 1, you pay yourself first. Also, you've probably heard of it before. But you switch the variables around for this equation. Yeah, rather than income minus expenses equals savings, you take income minus your savings. That is equivalent to your expenses. So during the start of the month, you allocate, say, 5, 10, 15, 20, or even 30% of your salary, depending on a figure that you're comfortable with. Just set it aside for your future. That is your savings. And the remainder, you can spend it on whatever you want. Let's say you want to buy a Honda Civic, you don't want to care too much about this 27-20 rule, right? Because you really want a Honda Civic, right? Well, just make sure that every month you have a positive savings. If at the end of the day, buying a Honda Civic sets you back into negative territory, that means you're building debt every month, then that is a very obvious telltale sign that you cannot afford that car. Next one is lifestyle inflation. Now, this one a lot of people tend to fall trap into, because as you increase your income, right, it becomes very tempting to upgrade your lifestyle as well. Let's say you recently got a very juicy promotion, okay, and you are earning twice compared to your previous salary. Then now you start to buy a new house and you start to buy a new car. And that is the pinnacle example of lifestyle inflation. So as much as possible, you don't want to inflate your lifestyle too much. You want to just gradually increase it bit by bit, but you want to make sure your income outpaces this. Okay, so that is the surefire way to guarantee your financial freedom. And these principles are actually discussed in detail with financial experts Han and Sunny last Sunday. Yeah, if you've missed the live session, you can actually watch the replay lah. So next thing, this one is about touch and go. It's quite important because recently many people have been reporting unauthorized transactions on the e-wallet. Okay, and to resolve this, the first thing that you need to do tonight is if you're using the TNG Visa card, right, go to the card settings, turn off all of these functions. ATM cash withdrawals, you don't want that. Online purchases, turn off that. Overseas spending, you're not even going overseas yet, right? So turn off that as well. As for your contactless payments, for me, I set the limit to 250 ringgit only. This is the first layer that prevents scammers from using your card for fraudulent transactions. Next one is you go to your e-wallet settings and reset your transaction limit. By default, Touch and Go's transaction limit is 120,000 ringgit per day. Okay, which is absurd, which is very crazy, I know. So later after this talk, or maybe you open your e-wallet right now, reset it back to a limit that you are comfortable with lah. Yeah, because Touch and Go, the limits are to the max currently for all users, which is why a lot of scams these days they come is probably from Touch and Go lah. So first one from Grimes. I received an annual increment recently and felt tempted to upgrade to a bigger slash better car from my first Proton Saga. I feel like financially it's better to finish paying off my current loan first rather than thinking of getting a new, more comfortable car. Furthermore, I know that cars will always be a depreciating asset, but with that recent announcement, it got even more tempting in that I thought this year is the best time to do it before the potential spikes in car prices. What is your advice on this? Thanks in advance. So I wouldn't say advice, but I would say just my general opinions on this. Okay. So regarding this, right, there's a lot of talks of this price increment, but what you got to know is that it has been deferred twice since 2019, and don't quote me on this. There is a likelihood that this year the government is going to U-turn and going to defer it again because this 10 to 30% increment is just really very, very crazy. And for it to be impacting local CKD cars only, it will definitely be detrimental to the automotive industry. So if the Ministry of Finance does really push through this regulation, well, it really shows how penny wise, pound foolish they are. Now that said, let's assume that it goes through, okay? That will definitely attract a lot of car buyers for 2025 because of the impending price hike, right? They might as well just say that, oh, I plan to change my car in the next 2-3 years, but since it will get much more expensive from 2026 onwards, might as well just change the car now, right? So before you consider that option, first ask yourself, after you factor in this equation, do you have any leftover savings? And is it a need or is it a want? I think it's probably going towards a want, and how important it is to you. Yeah, if it's important to you, and then considering this equation, at the end of the day, you're still left with a comfortable amount of savings, right? Then by all means, it's your right to go ahead and buy a new car. But if after you buying a new car and then you got to settle two loans at the same time, right, and it's making things a bit murky, sometimes you have no financial net, in some months, and you end up in the negative territory, right? That is a very obvious sign that purchasing this new car is not right for you. Okay, so it's very hard for me to say that, oh, car depreciating asset, don't buy a new car lah, because it will be valued like 20-30% less in the future. Everybody has different needs and wants. If you think that this car is really something that you want, you've been saving up quite some time, you've been waiting for that promotion, and after you've done this math over here, very simple math, right? And you feel that you can comfortably afford it, by all means, please go ahead. Okay, especially when considering that the car prices will increase by 10-30% next year, 2026. Okay, so yeah, hopefully I answered your question on this. And regarding the recent session on Spotify with financial experts, right? I actually wrote a in-depth summary of the Q&A session. Now, let's say you don't have time to listen to the hour-long podcast, you can read my recent article. It's basically a Q&A breakdown of what has been discussed during that hour-long session, inclusive of this equation, car installments, paying debt, so on and so forth, buy now, pay later. Yeah, so you can check out this recent article over here. Shout out to all our Gather members: CH, Andrew, Wendy, Alex, CC, Urshad, Caveman, Kelvin, Tommy, Jinkang, Adrian, JS, Wenyan, Duhan, Sufi, Faris, Alan, Jackson, Raizan, Hudson, Jeffrey, Lukman, Jack, YC, Kartik, Arif, Jinden, Leanda, Adam, Ashley, Sean, Jason, Putra, Alvin, Jachin, Aldrin, Chaiwei, Fami, Kimit, Justin, Michelle, Arif, Aisha, and Chi Sing, as well as all of our learner members. Thank you guys so much for joining. Happy Chinese New Year once again. Next week, there is no weekly analysis. I will see you guys the following week. All right, stay safe. Bye. Good night.